The neon lights of Marath Prime flickered in the distance as Jace Quinn raced through the dark alleys, his heart pounding in his chest. His plan, his future, everything was on the line. The heist was set, the stakes higher than ever, but something went horribly wrong. A betrayal. Someone had tipped off the bank, and now Jace was running for his life, with guards hot on his heels. The woman who had once given him a second chance, Elira, was at the center of it all, and Jace knew that if he couldn't fix this fast, he would lose not just his freedom, but her trust too. With everything crashing down around him, could Jace escape the deadly trap, or would he sacrifice everything for a love he never expected? Stay tuned to see what happens next. If you're new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's move to this wonderful story. Jace Quinn paced back and forth in his small rented room, his boots tapping against the cold metal floor. His mind raced with thoughts of how he could get out of this mess. The rent was due, and his pockets were as empty as his stomach. The neon-lit streets outside his window glowed brightly, alive with the hustle and bustle of the alien city, Marath Prime. But to Jace, the city might as well have been a faraway dream. Its vibrant life, its endless opportunities were out of his reach. His ship, a once beautiful vessel he'd worked years to acquire, had been impounded for lack of payment. His credit account was drained, and every job he took seemed to fall apart just when he thought he might get ahead. The situation was dire. He'd been stuck on Marath Prime for months now, with no clear way out. Every time he thought he might be able to pay his rent, something else broke or another urgent problem arose. The sound of a firm knock at the door jolted him from his thoughts. He sighed deeply and wiped a hand over his face. He knew that knock all too well, the authoritative rap of his landlady, Elira Mavash. Steeling himself, Jace walked over to the door. He straightened his shirt, forced a smile onto his face, and opened it. There she stood, Elira Mavash, tall and graceful, her lavender skin glowing under the dim hallway lights, her silver hair cascaded down her back in soft waves, and her amber eyes locked onto his with an intensity that made him feel like she could see right through him. "Mr. Quinn," she said, her voice melodic, sending a shiver down Jace's spine. "I believe we have some business to discuss." Jace leaned against the doorframe, his posture casual, trying to hide the knot of nerves twisting in his stomach. "Zara, my dear," he replied, using her name like an old friend. "You know you can call me Jace. Come in, let's talk." Elira stepped past him, her long skirts brushing against his legs as she entered the room. She didn't sit, instead, turning to face him, her posture stiff with purpose. "It's the first of the month, Jace," she said, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You know what that means." Jace sighed and ran a hand through his blonde hair. I know. The rent. "Look, Zara, I promise I'm working on it. I've got some leads, some big deals in the works. I just need a little more time." Elira took a step closer to him. The scent of her perfume, sweet and exotic, enveloped him. She reached out, her fingers grazing the collar of his shirt as she spoke. "Time is a luxury, Jace," she said, her voice low, almost a whisper. "One that I'm not sure I can afford to give you." Jace felt his pulse quicken. There was something in her voice, something more than just business. It was an invitation, a temptation he didn't want to resist. He looked at her, the allure of her alien beauty pulling at him, but he pushed the thought aside. His pride wouldn't let him give in to such an obvious flirtation. "Elira," he said softly, his voice steady. "You have no idea how much I appreciate the offer, and believe me, there's nothing I'd like more than to express my gratitude. But I can't. Not like this. You deserve better than some deadbeat spacer trying to charm his way out of debt. I respect you too much for that." Elira blinked, surprise flickering across her features. She took a small step back, studying him with renewed interest. "You're a rare breed, Jace Quinn," she said, her voice softer now. Not many men would turn down such an offer. Jace smiled, leaning against the doorframe, his confidence returning. "What can I say? I'm old-fashioned like that." Elira regarded him for a moment, her eyes studying him as if she were weighing the truth of his words. Then, with a small nod, she sighed. "Fine," she said, a smile playing at the corners of her lips. "I'll give you one more week to come up with the rent. But after that, well, I understand." Jace let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Relief flooded through him, but it was quickly replaced by urgency. 1 week. He had 1 week to come up with the credits he needed, or he'd be out on the streets. "Thank you, Elira," he said, his voice filled with genuine gratitude. "I won't let you down." Elira gave him a quick nod, her expression unreadable. "We'll see," she said, turning toward the door. As she reached for the handle, she paused and looked over her shoulder at him. "Just remember, Jace, time is a luxury, don't waste it." With that, she stepped out of the room, leaving Jace alone once again with his thoughts. The door clicked shut behind her, and the silence that followed was deafening. Jace stood still for a moment, the weight of the situation sinking in. He had a reprieve, but for how long? He needed to act fast. The money wouldn't come from nowhere, and there was no way he could afford to take any more risks. If he didn't pay the rent, he'd be out of a home and, worse, out of time. His mind raced as he started making plans. There had to be a way to scrape together the credits he needed. He just had to find it. He couldn't fail now. Not when he was so close to making something of himself on Mirath Prime. But as he thought about Elira, her beauty, and her cold, calculating demeanor, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a much larger problem. Jace Quinn wasn't the type to back down, and this time he wouldn't. He would find a way out of this mess no matter what it took. The clock was ticking. Jace sat on the edge of his bed, his mind whirling with possibilities and risks. 1 week. He had exactly 7 days to come up, with enough credits to pay his rent. His options were few, but desperation had always been a great motivator. As the neon lights of Mirath Prime flickered outside his window, he knew he had to get creative. The problem was, creativity didn't always pay the bills. He ran through the list of his usual contacts, old smugglers, questionable merchants, and shady traders, but nothing seemed promising. The rules of this place were clear. Work hard, cheat harder, and pray you don't get caught. He wasn't new to these streets, but lately it felt as though luck had abandoned him. Every deal had fallen through. Every hustle turned sour. He needed something big, something that would change his fate in a matter of hours. A sharp knock at the door pulled Jace from his thoughts. He sighed, rubbing a hand over his tired face. It had to be Elira again. Maybe she had come to check up on him, or worse. Maybe she had already decided to cut him loose. He opened the door, forcing a smile despite the heaviness in his chest. There she stood, her posture tall and commanding, her lavender skin glowing in the dim hallway light. Elira's presence always had a way of filling up the space around her, making the air seem thicker, more charged. Her amber eyes locked onto his with the intensity of someone who knew exactly what they wanted. "Mr. Quinn," she said, her voice calm, almost too calm. "I trust you've had some time to think." Jace leaned against the doorframe, trying to keep his composure. "I've been thinking about it, Elira. A lot. And trust me, I'm working on it. I'll get the credits to you. You know I will." Elira didn't speak immediately. Instead, she stepped past him, entering the room without invitation, her long silver hair swaying with each movement. The door clicked softly behind her as she stood in the center of the room, turning to face him. "Do you really think that I'm just going to wait around for you to get your act together?" Her words were laced with something Jace couldn't quite place. Was it frustration? Or perhaps something deeper? Jace didn't know how to answer. He had grown used to her cool demeanor, her air of authority. But tonight, there was something different in her gaze. It wasn't anger, but there was an undeniable intensity in the way she looked at him. It made his heart beat a little faster, and he couldn't help but wonder if she had been waiting for this moment, this opportunity to finally make him see things her way. "You're a man who has no money, no prospects, and no way out," she continued, her voice softening slightly but still edged with that same strange intensity. Yet, here you are, promising me that you'll come up with something. She took a step closer, her voice almost a whisper. What if I told you there was a way out? Jace's stomach tightened. What do you mean? He didn't like the way her words hung in the air, but he couldn't help but lean in, intrigued despite himself. Elira didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached into her robe and pulled out a small silver device, pressing a button to activate it. A hologram flickered to life in the air between them, displaying a blueprint of a building. A bank, Jace realized. A large, secure building with heavily guarded entrances and thick walls. This is the Marath Prime Central Bank, she said. It holds more than enough to make all your problems disappear, Jace. You could walk out of there with more credits than you could ever imagine. No one would even know you were there. Jace's heart began to race. He had seen the bank, of course. Everyone had. It was the crown jewel of the city, a fortress in the heart of the financial district. But to even think about pulling off a heist there? That was madness. The security was top-notch. Even the bravest criminals wouldn't dare. Are you out of your mind? He whispered. You want me to rob a bank? Elira's smile was small but knowing. Not exactly. I need someone to get inside. Someone who knows the ins and outs of this city, who knows how to bypass security. Someone like you, Jace. You've been here long enough to know the ropes. Jace took a step back, his mind reeling. You can't be serious. You want me to risk my life for you? The idea was absurd. The danger, the stakes. It was too much. He wasn't a criminal. He'd played the odds, hustled when he had to, but this was beyond anything he could handle. Elira's gaze softened for a moment, as if she were reading him, studying him like a puzzle piece she had yet to solve. Then she spoke again, her voice low and compelling. You're not just doing this for me, Jace, she said. You're doing this for yourself. You want to get out of here, don't you? You want to leave this place. Start fresh. Start over. I'm offering you that chance. This could be your way out. Jace stood there in stunned silence, the weight of her words pressing down on him. He had been so focused on surviving, on getting through each day, that he hadn't considered what it would really take to escape. He looked at her, his heart pounding. And if I do this, what do you get out of it? Her smile was slow, but it was genuine. I get what I need, and you get everything you've ever wanted. Jace could feel the pull of her words, the allure of the life she was offering him. He had never been one to shy away from risk, but this was different. This was something far bigger than anything he had ever done before. And as much as his instinct screamed at him to walk away, he knew, deep down, that he didn't have a choice. I'll do it, he said, his voice steady despite the chaos inside him. Elira's smile widened, but it wasn't the triumphant grin of someone who had won a battle. It was the smile of someone who knew this was only the beginning. Good, she said, her tone more businesslike now. I'll arrange everything, but remember, Jace, time is a luxury, don't waste it. And with that she was gone, leaving Jace alone in the quiet room, the hologram still hovering in the air, reminding him of the dangerous path he had just agreed to walk. Jace had no idea what he was getting himself into, but he knew one thing for certain. His life on Marath Prime would never be the same again. The days following Jace's agreement to Elira's proposal passed in a blur of preparation and dread. Marath Prime, once a vibrant and chaotic city of opportunity, now felt like a labyrinth of danger and deceit. Jace had taken on more dangerous tasks, pushing himself harder than ever to meet the ever-growing demand of Elira's plan. The bank heist was no longer just an impossible idea. It had become his only way out. Jace spent the next few days scouring the city, studying the bank's security systems, learning every alley, every back door that could be useful for the job. But it wasn't just the heist that occupied his mind. Elira lingered there as well. There was something about her presence, something magnetic that he couldn't resist. It wasn't just the deal she had offered him. No, there was something deeper, something more dangerous than he could put into words. Every time they spoke, the tension between them grew thicker, the line between business and personal blurring further. Elira's confidence, her beauty, and her cool, calculating nature stirred something inside him, something he had long buried beneath layers of self-preservation. She wasn't just a landlady anymore. She was a force he couldn't ignore, no matter how hard he tried. Elira, for her part, seemed to understand the effect she had on him. She knew he needed her, both for the heist and for something more. Their interactions had become more intimate. Flirtatious touches, lingering glances, and quiet moments shared in the shadows of her office or in the private corridors of the boarding house. Each touch, each word, only added fuel to the fire that simmered beneath the surface of their relationship. One evening, after a long day spent running errands and gathering information, Jace found himself standing in Elira's office, once again. The air between them crackled with unspoken words, and as he entered, Elira didn't look up immediately. She was sitting behind her desk, her amber eyes scanning a holographic screen, her silver hair cascading down in waves over her shoulders. "You're late," she said, her voice smooth, as if she'd been expecting him all along. Jace couldn't help but smirk. "I had a few things to wrap up." She raised an eyebrow, glancing up at him with a small, knowing smile. "I hope you're not getting cold feet." Jace took a few steps into the room, the door clicking softly behind him. He leaned against the desk, his eyes locking with hers. "I'm in this, Elira. I told you that." Her smile widened slightly. "Good. I wouldn't want you to back out now." There was a moment of silence between them, the tension so thick it felt like the air itself was alive. Jace couldn't look away from her, and when Elira finally stood up, her movement was fluid, graceful, and hypnotic. She stepped closer to him, her lavender skin glowing in the dim light of the room. The distance between them shrank, and Jace's breath caught in his throat as he felt the pull of her presence. "Jace?" Elira murmured, her voice soft but filled with meaning. "You're not just doing this for yourself, are you? You're doing it for me. For us." He swallowed hard, not sure how to respond. "What do you mean by that?" Elira reached up and touched his cheek, her fingers cool against his warm skin. "I know what you're thinking. You think this is all just business. But it's more than that. You and I, we could have something more. We could build something together." Jace felt the weight of her words settle in his chest. She wasn't just offering him a way out of his financial troubles. She was offering him something deeper, something he didn't know how to respond to. His mind raced with confusion, his heart beating faster as he struggled to make sense of it all. "Look, Elira," he began, but his words faltered as she stepped, even closer, her body nearly pressing against his. She didn't say a word. Instead, she reached up and gently cupped his face, tilting his head so that their eyes met. Her amber eyes were intense, her gaze unreadable, and for a moment, Jace was lost in them. "You don't have to pretend anymore, Jace," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know what this is, what it can be. I see you. I've seen you from the moment you stepped into this building. You've been running from something from your past, but I want you to know that I'm here. I'm offering you a way out of all of it if you'll let me." Her words hit him like a physical blow. Jace had always been a man of action, someone who relied on his quick wit and charm to get by. But here, in Elira's office, surrounded by the unspoken weight of her gaze, he felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a long time. Vulnerability. Before he could respond, Elira leaned in, her lips brushing against his with a softness that made his pulse race. It wasn't a fiery kiss, but rather a slow, deliberate exploration, as if she were testing the waters, waiting to see if he would pull away or lean in closer. Jace didn't pull away. Instead, he deepened the kiss, his arms coming around her as he pulled her into him. For a moment, everything else faded away. The rent, the heist, the past. All that mattered was the warmth of her body against his, the electric current that seemed to surge between them. It was a dangerous connection, one that neither of them had planned for, but neither of them could resist. When they finally pulled away, breathless and a little shaken, Elira looked at him with a knowing smile, I knew you wouldn't be able to resist. Jace ran a hand through his hair, his mind still spinning. What does this mean, Elira? What are we doing? She stepped back, her smile softening. We're doing exactly what we need to do, Jace. We're surviving, and maybe, just maybe, we're building something more. But first we need to finish what we started. Jace nodded, his resolve hardening once more. He had a job to do. The heist was still on, and now, more than ever, he knew there was no turning back. But as he looked at Elira, standing there with her fierce determination and the soft promise of something more, he couldn't help but wonder if this was what he had been searching for all along. The line between business and personal had blurred, and in that moment Jace wasn't sure if he was fighting for the rent or for something far more dangerous, the possibility of love, sacrifice, and a future he couldn't yet imagine. But one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. The days that followed were a blur of action and urgency. Jace's mind raced as he tried to balance the mounting pressure of the heist with the complex, growing bond he shared with Elira. The deal was still in motion, and the clock was ticking. Every day brought new challenges, new risks, but also a sense of urgency that only grew stronger as the deadline approached. But there was another element in the equation now: Elira. What had started as a simple business arrangement had quickly turned into something far more complicated, something he wasn't prepared for. For the first time in a long while, Jace wasn't thinking only about himself. He was thinking about her, about the fire she had ignited in him. The quiet moments they shared, long glances, stolen touches, whispered words, became an escape, a way to momentarily forget the dangers lurking just around the corner. But as much as he wanted to pretend that everything could go back to normal, Jace knew that there was no escaping the truth. The heist was looming, and they were both walking a fine line between survival and destruction. Elira was no longer just the alien landlady who had made a deal with him. She had become something more: a partner in crime, a confidant, and something Jace couldn't easily define. She had opened herself up to him just as he had let her into his life. It was a delicate dance, this balance between affection and business, and neither of them had yet learned how to walk it without tripping. Elira's office, which had once been a place of sterile, professional conversations, had become a haven for them both. After hours, when the day's business was done, they would sit together in the quiet, talking about everything and nothing. Sometimes it was about their pasts, the things that had brought them to this point. Other times it was about their future, the things they could build together if they managed to pull this off. Jace had never been one to dream big, but with Elira by his side, he found himself imagining a future where things were different, where he wasn't running from debt, from failure, from his past. But those dreams always came with a price. One evening, as the sun set behind the distant city skyline, casting long shadows across the room, Elira sat by the window staring out into the horizon. Jace could see the tension in her posture, the tightness in her shoulders. She had always been composed, but tonight something was different. "You're worried," Jace said, stepping into the room quietly, his voice low. Elira didn't turn to face him. "I'm always worried," she replied softly. "I've spent years building my life here, Jace, and now it feels like it's all slipping away." Jace crossed the room and stood beside her, his eyes following hers as they gazed out over the Yar city. "You're not alone in this, we'll figure it out." She finally turned to him, her amber eyes meeting his with an intensity that made his heart race. "It's not just the deal, Jace. It's everything. You, me, this whole situation. I've already lost so much. I can't lose you too." Jace's chest tightened at her words. He hadn't realized how much her admission would affect him. He reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder, pulling her close. "You won't lose me. I promise." For a long moment they stood there, the weight of unspoken emotions filling the space between them. Then, Elira took a deep breath and pulled away from his embrace, her eyes softening as she spoke again. I want you to know something, Jace, she said, her voice firm but quiet. Whatever happens with the heist, whatever happens with this plan, I want you to understand that I trust you. More than I've trusted anyone in a long time. You've proven yourself in ways I didn't expect, and I don't know what I would do without you. Jace's heart skipped a beat. The sincerity in her voice, the way she looked at him, it hit him harder than anything had before. He hadn't just been some hired hand to her. He had become someone important, someone worth trusting. And that meant more to him than he could explain. I won't let you down, Elira, he said, his voice low and steady. I'll do whatever it takes. But even as he spoke, a nagging feeling tugged at the back of his mind. He could feel the tension building, the sense that something was about to go wrong. The heist, the money, Elira, everything was too perfect, too fragile. And in his gut, Jace knew that their success wasn't guaranteed. The risks were high, the stakes were life or death, and as much as he wanted to believe everything would work out, he knew better. The universe didn't work that way. The following days were a blur of preparations, each one more exhausting than the last. Jace continued to work tirelessly, meeting with shady contacts, mapping out the security systems, and rehearsing his role in the heist. He was getting close. He could feel it. They were so close to the money, to the freedom he'd always dreamed of. But the closer they got, the more he felt the weight of the situation pressing down on him. Then, just as the plan was about to go into motion, something unexpected happened. Jace was called in by one of his contacts, a man named Rykor, who had been involved in some of the most high-risk jobs Jace had ever taken on. Rykor had always been a man of few words, but when he spoke, people listened. What's going on? Jace asked, his eyes narrowing as Rykor handed him a data pad. Rykor's face was grim. The bank's been tipped off. Someone knows what you're planning, Jace. And if you don't get out now, you're walking into a trap. Jace's blood ran cold. His mind raced as he processed the information. Who could have betrayed him? Who had gotten wind of the heist? But before he could ask more questions, the door to the small office burst open, and armed guards stormed in, weapons drawn. It was a setup. Jace's heart raced as he darted for cover, his body moving on instinct. He grabbed the data pad, clutched it to his chest, and sprinted toward the back exit, his mind clouded with panic. He had no idea who was behind this, but one thing was clear. Everything had changed. Elira's trust, the money, the future, they were all slipping through his fingers. Outside, the streets of Marath Prime were chaotic, the sounds of sirens and shouting filling the air. Jace didn't stop to look back. He had to get to Elira, warn her, find a way out before everything fell apart. But as he ran through the dark alleyways, a thought crossed his mind. Would he ever be able to outrun the consequences of this betrayal? Would Elira ever forgive him for the choices he had made? In that moment, with the weight of everything he had worked for crashing down around him, Jace realized that the real fight wasn't just about money or survival. It was about loyalty, sacrifice, and the love that had bloomed in the darkest corners of his life. And now, more than ever, he knew he would do anything to protect that love, even if it meant losing everything else.